I always feel a little ridiculous saying this, but I used to think camping would fix me. Not the hardcore kind, just the cute Instagram version of healing. Enamel mugs, quiet mornings, nature doing its thing. That was the vibe my best friend Tiffany promised when she talked me into a weekend in Pisgah. I was a burned-out barista living on espresso shots and tips. She was the outdoorsy one. I loved pictures of forests, not the actual forests. But we were both stressed and broke, so a cheap, quiet campsite sounded perfect. And honestly, the first couple hours were perfect. We set up our little tent in a clearing off a gravel road, cooked ramen on the camp stove, drank cheap cider, and took way too many photos of ourselves pretending to be outdoors people. The sunset was unreal, all soft gold and blue haze. Even I started to relax. When the fire got going and the sky filled with stars, I actually let myself believe this trip might reset my brain a little. Around then, Tiffany stood up with a handful of empty cans and said, "I'm gonna grab more firewood before it gets too dark. I'll be like 10 minutes. I watched her headlamp bob away into the trees, then disappear. I checked the time, 8:37 p.m. I remember because I was surprised it wasn't later. 10 minutes passed, normal. 15 minutes. Still normal, but quieter. I called out, "Tiff," no answer. I tried again, louder, still nothing. I stood, brushing dirt off my jeans, telling myself she probably found a big log and was wrestling with it. The forest around me was settling into night. Insects, the crack of the fire, wind slipping through branches. Then a scream tore out of the woods. Not a little yelp, a full, ragged scream of pure panic. And it was her voice. "Help!" Then, clear as anything, "Help!" I shot upright so fast I knocked over my mug. I didn't even feel the cider splash across my ankle. I was already a few steps into the trees when something rustled behind me. Tiffany walked out of the dark on the opposite side of the campsite, the one away from the scream. Arms full of firewood, headlamp bright, totally unharmed. "What are you doing?" she asked. Behind me, from deep in the woods, her voice screamed again. She froze. Our fire crackled. Everything in me pulled tight like a wire. The scream rolled over us, desperate and frantic. The exact way she yelled when she burned her hand on a pan once. Same pitch, same breathy break in the middle. If she hadn't been standing right there, I would have run straight toward it. I managed, "That's not funny." "It's not me," she whispered, eyes locked on mine. The screaming didn't stop. It grew more frantic, like somebody stumbling downhill, calling for help between sobs. "Please, help." I grabbed Tiffany's wrist. "Car, now." We ran. No argument, no hesitation. I half smothered the fire with dirt, and we sprinted across the clearing to the car like something was about to reach out of the dark and grab our shoulders. I unlocked it. We dove inside. Doors slammed, locks clicked. The screams kept coming, echoing weirdly, bouncing from one direction to another, never landing in a spot we could point to. It sounded exactly like her. Not just a woman, her. Tiffany had her hands over her ears. I stared out the windshield, feeling like the dark between the trees was alive. "What is that?" she asked. I don't know. And I didn't. I just knew I wasn't stepping into that forest to find out. Another scream arcs through the night. "Help!" My phone screen lit up when I tapped it. 0 bars. No emergency call possible. "We can't help," I said. "We can't see anything. We can't call anyone. And you weren't in there." Tiffany didn't answer. She was breathing too fast. The screaming twisted, slipping into this awful pleading tone. My hand shook on the keys. "We have to go," I said. "What if it's someone actually hurt?" she whispered. "What if it's not?" That landed. Hard. I turned the key. The engine started up, and the screaming stopped instantly, like someone hit mute. We sat there for half a second, both of us holding perfectly still, listening to a silence that felt wrong. No insects, no wind, No crackle from the smothered fire, just the low hum of the engine. "Seatbelt," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. We backed out fast, our headlights slicing between the trees as we rolled down the gravel road. Every shadow looked like someone standing still, waiting. Every turn felt too narrow, too dark. Once we hit the main road, I didn't slow down until we pulled into a gas station with actual fluorescent lights. Tiffany went inside. I just sat there staring at my hands on the steering wheel, like they belonged to someone else. We didn't call the Rangers. What were we supposed to say? Something in the woods was screaming in my best friend's voice, but she was right next to me. They'd chalk it up to panic or night echoes or us scaring ourselves. But here's the thing I can't shake. The screaming didn't just sound like her. It matched her. Tone. Rhythm. The tiny breaks in her voice when she's terrified. Things you only recognize after years of friendship. Someone or something copied her perfectly. And whatever it was, it wanted me far away from the fire, deep in the trees, alone. I haven't camped since. Anytime I hear someone call from far off, a jogger, a parent, anyone, something inside me pulls tight for a second. Because now I know voices can lie. Now I know voices can call you from the dark in the exact tone of someone you love. And I'm pretty sure that night in Pisgah, it didn't want help. It wanted me. I kept telling myself this was supposed to be a simple break. One quick nature day before diving back into exam prep. Waterfall, fresh air, then home. That's all. I'd been drowning in vet school work. Flashcards in every pocket, highlighters everywhere, my brain buzzing like a trapped fly. So on a Saturday morning in 2022, I grabbed my day pack, downloaded the trail map, and drove toward a hidden waterfall in Chattahoochee National Forest. The trail was supposed to be quiet, pretty, and, my mistake, secluded. I left pavement behind faster than I expected. The road tapered into packed dirt, then into a narrow service road with ruts deep enough to grab a tire. Trees crowded both sides, shadows stretching across the windshield. I checked my phone out of habit. No service. Not surprising, but still a little punch of anxiety. I kept going. No houses, no other cars for miles. I actually said out loud, "Relax. People do this all the time," which always means I'm not relaxed. A few minutes later, I looked into the rear view, and there it was, a silver pickup. I didn't see it approach. It was just suddenly there, perfectly centered behind me. Not close enough to tailgate, not far enough to dismiss. I slowed a little. The truck slowed too. I sped up. It sped up. My throat tightened. I tried being logical. Maybe he's going to the same trail. Maybe he's a local who drives this pacing. Maybe I'm projecting too much from all the crime podcasts I use as study breaks. But that truck stayed locked behind me for a full 20 minutes, never changing position, never closing in, never dropping back. By the time the trailhead appeared, a small gravel pullout with a faded wooden sign, I felt both relieved and sick. At least it was a place to stop. I angled my car into the lot, killed the engine, and waited to see if the truck would pass. It didn't. It turned in, rolled to a stop behind me, and switched off its headlights. But the engine stayed running. He didn't get out, didn't adjust anything, didn't look around, just idled there. I sat still for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Logic whispered, "It's public land. Anyone can be here." Instinct whispered louder, "Nope." But I'd come all this way, and leaving felt embarrassing, like I'd be letting him dictate my day. So I got out, pretending not to notice him, and headed up the trail with a speed that probably looked ridiculous if he was watching. The forest swallowed me quickly, just trees, damp earth, and a distant rush of water. I kept listening for footsteps behind me, but heard nothing except the normal trail sounds. After about a mile, I reached the waterfall. It was small but pretty, fanning over red rock into a shallow pool. I snapped one picture, then immediately felt stupid, like I was documenting something I didn't want tied to me. I headed back almost immediately, half hoping, half begging the universe that the truck would be gone. It wasn't. When the trail opened into the parking lot, my heart climbed into my throat. My car was where I'd left it, but the silver truck wasn't behind me anymore. Now it was parked inches from my driver's side door, angled slightly inward, as if blocking me in. I froze mid-step, forcing myself to keep my face neutral, like I was just admiring the trail map. My hands shook inside my sleeves. The truck's engine was off now, windows tinted. Still no movement inside. I pulled out my phone, even though I knew it was useless. I pretended to scroll, pretended the view was interesting, pretended I wasn't planning 10 different escape routes in my head. Then I saw the driver's window rolling down. Just a thin opening, just enough for eyes. I finally looked. Middle-aged man, clean cap, too clean for someone supposedly hanging out alone on a dusty forest road. He smiled as soon as we made eye contact. "Pretty spot to get lost," he said. "Don't you think?" His tone was soft, almost friendly, but the words weren't. Something in me snapped into focus. I didn't answer. I didn't walk closer. I didn't even pretend to laugh. Instead, I casually shifted direction like I'd forgotten something behind my car. The moment his sightline broke, I beelined for the passenger door, yanked it open, and slid in fast. I hit the lock button before the door even shut, scrambled across the console, jammed the key in, and fired up the engine. He didn't move. He just watched me through that narrow window slit. I reversed fast, twisted the wheel, and shot onto the service road. Branches whipped the side mirrors. After a few seconds, I checked the mirror. The silver truck was coming. Headlights snapping on like he'd just been waiting for the cue. He kept the exact same distance behind me as before. Not tailgating, not disappearing. Just that same unnerving, locked-in gap. Every curve, every dip, every straightaway, still there. My palms were slick on the wheel. My brain kept replaying his sentence like a warning I'd missed the meaning of. Pretty spot to get lost. There was nowhere to pull off without being trapped. Nowhere to turn around without giving him a perfect angle. All I could do was keep driving and pray nothing went wrong. It felt like hours, but finally the dirt road spat me back onto pavement. I didn't slow down. I took the first right toward town, scanning for signs of life. When I spotted a gas station with a sheriff's cruiser parked out front, I pulled in like my life depended on it. The truck didn't. It drove past without even tapping its brakes, disappearing down the highway like none of it mattered. I sat in the lot, gripping the wheel until my breathing evened out. I considered walking up to the deputy inside, but decided not to. I had nothing tangible, nothing illegal, just a man who waited, watched, and smiled like the outcome was already decided. Now I avoid trailheads with only one car. I never trust a vehicle that keeps perfect distance behind me on a back road. And I never, ever assume I'm being dramatic. The part that still gets me, the part that creeps under my skin, isn't that he followed me. It's that he never once got out of the truck. Not to hike, not to stretch, not to look around. He just waited for me to come back. I've never been the superstitious type. I'm a mechanic. I deal with real things. Broken bolts, seized bearings, rusted frames. Machines don't lie. People do. Stories do. But metal tells the truth. That's part of why this messed with me so badly. This was back in 2016. I was working late at the garage trying to finish a job for a guy who absolutely had to have his truck the next morning. By the time I clocked out, it was almost midnight. The air was cool, sky clear, woods dark as pitch. From the shop to my house, there's the long route with lights and traffic, or the back roads. Curvy, quiet, faster. I always took the back roads. I knew them like I'd paved them myself, except for one part, the old one-lane iron bridge. Everyone in the area joked about it. Haunted this, ghost that, but that's the kind of stuff people say to spook teenagers. It never bothered me. A bridge is just metal and planks. It creaks, it shifts, it settles. That's physics, not spirits. So that night, I turned onto the back road. No streetlights, no houses, just woods pressing in tight and my headlights cutting 2 tunnels through the dark. Window cracked for the breeze, radio low to keep me company. Nothing unusual. Within a few minutes, the outline of the bridge rose out of the dark. Rusted lattice overhead, wooden planks for the tires, water moving far below. The thing looks worse than it is. The county re-inspects it every couple years. It's safe enough. During the day, at least. I rolled onto the boards, hearing that familiar hollow thump-thump under my tires. Halfway across, it happened. A baby cried. Not faint, not far away, right under the bridge. One long, desperate wail rolled up from the black space below me, followed by these hiccuping sobs, raw, full-bodied, the way infants cry when they're terrified or hurt. Before I even processed it, I slammed the brakes so hard the truck jolted. The sound was too real, too close. Some instinct in me, something older than logic, kicked in, and I was out on the planks before I could think twice. The crying stopped the instant my boots hit the boards. Just gone. 1 second the air was full of that awful wail. The next, it was like someone had stuffed cotton into the night. No wind, no animals. Just silence sitting heavy under the beams. My flashlight was in the door pocket. I snatched it, walked to the railing, and leaned over, shining down between the gaps. Nothing. Just water sliding under the bridge, black and smooth, catching the light in thin streaks. The concrete supports were half crumbled from winters and floods. If someone had been down there, I should have caught a glimpse. Something reflecting, moving, shifting. But there was nothing. "Hey!" I called out before I even realized I was doing it. My voice bounced off the metal and vanished. Silence. For a few seconds, I just stood there, listening, breathing slow, trying to convince myself I'd misheard or maybe the sound had echoed weird off the water. But then I heard something else. Something that didn't fit any animal I knew. Footsteps. Not under the bridge. Off to the right, near the end of it. Fast, light steps hitting dirt and gravel. Running. I turned the flashlight toward the sound, sweeping the beam over the ground and tree line. Gravel shoulder. Trunks. Shadow. Empty road stretching ahead. But the footsteps kept going, moving quickly up the slope and into the trees. Then gone. I stayed planted, turning in slow arcs with the flashlight. I didn't want to assume anything. Foxes scream, raccoons scuttle, deer crash through brush. But this wasn't any of that. I grew up around these woods. I know the difference. This sounded human, and it sounded like they were trying to get away. I didn't like the idea that someone was down there in the dark, crying like an infant, then sprinting into the woods when a truck stopped. There's no scenario where that's normal. None. I leaned over the rail again, sweeping the creek. Still nothing. Just the trickle of water and the dark pressing in. Finally, I backed toward the truck, keeping the light on the tree line instead of turning around. My boots felt too loud on the planks, like anything hiding out there could track me by sound alone. Once I was inside, I locked the doors out of reflex and just sat there with the flashlight in my lap. The boards under the tires creaked as the truck settled. Still nothing. No crying, no footsteps. Just a quiet that felt a little too intentional. I put it in drive and eased off the bridge, fighting the urge to check my rear view. It wasn't until I was a mile down the road that I realized my hands were gripping the wheel too hard. The rest of the drive didn't feel familiar anymore. When I got home, I parked and didn't move for a while, just sat there with the engine ticking as it cooled. I tried explaining it away. Maybe it was a fox. Maybe the running was a deer. Maybe the crying echoed weird. But that wasn't the truth. I knew it. I heard what I heard. The next day at work, I mentioned it to the guys. Not like I'm terrified, but more like, you won't believe this crap. One of the older mechanics just looked at me. like he'd been waiting for someone else to say it first. "You heard the baby," he said. That wording bothered me more than the sound itself. Turns out, people had heard it before. Over the years, drivers had rolled their windows down to check because they thought something was wrong. Crying under the bridge, woman sobbing, laughing sometimes, and footsteps running into the woods if anyone actually stopped. But nobody ever found anything. No blankets, no clothing, no animals caught under the planks. Nothing. Just people hearing things that shouldn't be there. I asked him what he thought it was. He shrugged. Could be some creep messing with folks. Could be kids. Could be worse. I sure as hell wouldn't get under that bridge at night. I laughed it off in front of him, but it didn't help. Whatever I heard wasn't a prank. Not out there. Not at midnight. Not with no houses for miles and no cars behind me. I switched to the long route permanently after that. If I had to cross the bridge in the daytime, I kept the windows up and didn't slow down. People still joke about it. Ghost stories, old tragedies, the usual small-town folklore. I don't care about any of that. I don't need legends to explain it. I only know one thing. Someone was under that bridge, making baby noises, and running away when I stopped. Whoever it was didn't expect me to hit the brakes, and that bothers me more than anything else. I've slept in some real garbage spots over the years. Truck cabs, motels that smelled like wet carpet, rest areas where you pray nobody knocks on your window. After a few decades of long haul, you stop being picky. So when I tell you this one got under my skin, I mean it. This was 2017, Highway 212 in Montana. I was bouncing between jobs and towing my little travel camper instead of running my full rig. It's a tiny thing. One bed, one table, one light that flickers whenever it wants. But it lets me get off the busy truck stops and sleep in quiet places. That night, I pulled off at one of those gravel turnouts on the side of the highway. Just a rough circle of dirt and tire ruts with miles of open land around it. No houses, no lights, not even a fence. Just Montana doing that thing where the sky feels too big and the dark is too thick. It was close to 9:30. I parked, killed the engine, stepped outside to stretch my back. The wind cut across the field, sharp and cold. Nothing moved except the grass brushing against itself. The road was dead silent. "Good enough," I muttered. Old man habit. Inside, I locked the door, flicked on the LED strip, made a sandwich, checked my route for the morning, and shut the phone off to save battery. By 10, I was out. When you're tired enough, you could sleep on rebar. I don't know how long I slept, but I remember waking up instantly, like someone snapped their fingers next to my ear. The camper was pitch dark. My little digital clock showed 3:02 a.m. And then it came. 3 knocks. Soft. Way too soft. Like someone didn't want to startle me. Just get my attention. I lay still for a few seconds, listening. Sometimes the walls make noises, but this wasn't the walls. This was the door. First thing I checked was the motion light mounted above it. You could see the glow through the blinds when it triggered. It was off, so whoever knocked didn't register as movement, or was standing somewhere the sensor couldn't see. I slid out of bed, grabbed my folding knife, and crept to the tiny window next to the door. I lifted one corner of the blind. Nothing. Just the gravel lot, a faint outline of shrubs, and a whole lot of black. I stood there another few seconds, telling myself it might have been wind or something loose outside. Except there was nothing out there to hit against the door. Then the knocking came again. 3 taps. This time it sounded closer to the latch. The motion light stayed dark. That's when my stomach tightened. I've dealt with bears nosing around trucks before. You hear the weight of them. You feel it in the metal. This sounded like fingers. Curious fingers tracing the door like they were looking for weak spots. I moved to the table and sat facing the door, knife on the surface, hand on the handle. Not a hero move, just the only move I had. The next sound wasn't a knock, it was a rub, something dragging across the metal skin. slow, wandering like it was feeling its way down the frame. Every few inches, there'd be a tiny tap, testing, checking. It moved from the top corner down to the latch, then lower, then back up, almost systematic. Kids don't wander around out here, I said, though the idea didn't fit anyway. There wasn't a house for miles. The rubbing stopped. For maybe 10 seconds, everything went dead quiet. Then, bang, enough to shake the whole door in its frame. I shot up and yelled through the door, "I'm armed and I already called the cops." Complete lie. I didn't have a gun with me and my phone was dead silent in airplane mode, but fear makes you sound more confident than you are. Everything went silent again. No rubbing, no knocking, no wind. Then footsteps, slow ones, on gravel, moving away from the door. I hurried back to the window, lifted the blind again, expecting to see someone walk into the area where the motion light should have gone off. Still nothing. Light stayed dark. That was the part that hit me hardest. The sensor sits high and points down. Anything human-sized moving away from the door has to pass through its field. I've watched it go off for raccoons, even big bugs, but whatever was out there didn't trigger it. I stayed at that window a long time, long enough for the horizon to turn from black to dark gray. When the sky finally started to lighten, I got dressed fast, sweeping everything into cabinets. I didn't even check outside first, just grabbed what I needed, unlocked the door, and stepped out with the knife in my hand. The lot looked exactly the same as the night before. No footprints I could see, though gravel doesn't show much. No other vehicles, just emptiness. I didn't bother with coffee, didn't bother with a walk around, didn't bother trying to explain anything to myself. I hit the road and didn't slow down for an hour. At the first gas station I found, I parked and just sat for a minute, letting the normal world feel normal again. Another driver wandered by and asked why I looked wired. I told him I'd heard something mess with the door last night. He laughed, probably the wind. I let him believe that. But I know what I heard. I know the sound of fingers on metal. I know how a door feels when something hits it. And I know the light never turned on. Not once. Whatever was out there touched the door. And out in the middle of Montana at 3 a.m., with nothing between me and that knock except a thin sheet of metal? Yeah, that's enough to make any man pick a motel next time. I'm a retired firefighter, so I'll start with this. I'm not the kind of guy who scares easy, and I'm not the kind of guy who cuts corners, especially outdoors. If something goes wrong out there, it's because someone got sloppy. That's what I always believed. This trip made me rethink that. In 2019, I took a solo camping trip out to Canyonlands. No crowds, no chatter, just red rock, quiet air, and enough space for a man to hear himself think. I set up a small tent in a patch of open desert and built a tiny fire, nothing more than what I needed to cook dinner and stay warm for a bit. When it came time to sleep, I went through every safety step without even thinking. Scatter the logs, collapse the coals, pour water until the hissing dies, stir the ash, more water, hand test, cold. A dead fire is a dead fire. Mine was cold as stone. I zipped myself into the tent, listened to the desert settle into that strange, soft quiet, and fell asleep. I woke up just before dawn. Not from anything obvious, just that instinctive alertness old firefighters get after decades of alarms. The tent was pale blue inside. I unzipped the door halfway and leaned out to get a breath of crisp morning air. That's when I saw him. A man was sitting cross-legged in the center of my fire pit. Not beside it, not near it, on it. Hands resting on his knees, back straight, face pointed directly at my tent. His clothes were spotless, clean pants, clean jacket, no dust, no sweat, nothing to suggest he'd been hiking or even walking on desert soil. No pack, no water, no gear. Just him, sitting there like he'd been placed. My brain immediately tried to categorize him. Ranger, lost tourist, someone injured, but nothing fit. He didn't look confused, didn't look tired, didn't look like he'd been out all night. He just watched me. I stepped out of the tent slowly, keeping my hands visible. "Morning," I said. Calm, direct. Nothing, not a blink. I tried again. "You all right? Need water?" Still nothing. He didn't look around, didn't shift, didn't acknowledge anything I said. He just breathed. That was somehow worse. I inched a little closer to my table where my bear spray was. My voice stayed measured, but inside I was running through every scenario I knew. Dehydration, shock, drugs, mental break. But even those usually come with something. Fidgeting, eye movement, a twitch. This man gave me absolutely nothing. I tried humor. "If you wanted the good seat, you should have come by when the fire was still going." No reaction. His stare felt like he wasn't looking at me, but through me. Like he was waiting for something. By then, every part of me was alert. The desert makes even normal things feel uncanny. But this wasn't normal. I wrapped my fingers around the bear spray handle, not raising it, just holding it at my side. The moment my hand closed around the spray, the man moved. He just stood up, all at once, like someone pulled him up by a rope tied to the top of his head. I've seen tens of thousands of people stand in my life. Nobody moves like that. Nobody. He turned, not with the normal stagger of feet and shoulders, but as if his whole body pivoted in one motion. Then he walked away, just straight into open desert. And this part I swear on my career, on every oath I ever took. He left no footprints. None. I checked immediately. The soil around my camp was powder fine, soft enough that even my socks left clear impressions. His footsteps should have been obvious, but the ground behind him stayed smooth. He walked until he blended into the pale morning light and vanished among the rocks without a single look back. I stood there holding the spray, listening. I packed up slowly, but without wasting time. Tent down, gear in the truck, eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Before leaving the park, I stopped at the ranger station. I almost said something. I almost asked if a hiker had gone missing, or if anyone strange had been reported out there recently. But I couldn't figure out how to start that sentence. "Hi, did anyone see a man walking around without leaving footprints?" I just paid the entrance fee and went on my way. Something visited me. I just don't know from where. People like to say the desert is empty, that it's all rock, wind, and silence. They're wrong. I'm not a superstitious man. I've seen enough real disasters to know humans and nature create plenty of danger without needing anything mystical. But that morning, that man, he didn't come from any trail. He didn't leave by any path. And he didn't stand or move like any living person I've ever seen. The desert isn't empty. Something came to see me that morning. And I still don't know why. If any part of you whispered nope during these stories, smash that like button, subscribe so you never miss the next scare, and let me know which moment got you. And if you think being followed on a service road is bad, you definitely haven't watched the next video. Click now to watch 4 very scary camping horror stories. Because tents don't keep everything out. Or stay right here. The algorithm has another nightmare ready for you. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.